Thanks for joining us on the program today. I am BC Adebayo. We'll begin in Kenya, where 6 police officers have been charged with murder and assault for their alleged involvement in shootings while enforcing a nationwide dusk-to-dawn curfew aimed at curbing spread of the coronavirus. This is contained in a report by the Kenyan Independent Police Oversight Authority. The UN Human Rights Office documented widespread police violence in 182 communities across the country, including use of live ammunition and tear gas, sexual violence and damage to property. The highest number of incidents relating to the excessive use of force by police were documented in the capital, Nairobi. The police has responded, with a spokesperson, Charles Oweno, attributing the report as simply allegations and complaints filed by the public, and every case mentioned would need to be investigated. Over now to Uganda, where President Yoweri Museveni says the country is preparing a 40,000-bed field hospital at Nambole Stadium in the capital, Kampala, for coronavirus patients. It says the Ministry of Health was initially planning for a 9,000-bed capacity, but he had instructed that the capacity be increased. Uganda has so far recorded 657 cases of COVID-19, and President Museveni says the country has managed to prevent deaths related to the disease, but warns that as the numbers increase, there could be more deaths. And in South Africa, the headquarters of the Air Force in the capital, Pretoria, has been temporarily closed after 2 people working there tested positive for COVID-19. The military says in a statement that the building was evacuated on Tuesday as a precautionary measure and would be closed over the next 2 days for deep cleaning. Now, they've advised all employees who had contact with the infected people over the last 14 days to get tested. South Africa has the highest number of coronavirus cases in the continent. First, it was Tanzania, and now it's Malawi, where former President Joyce Banda told a campaign rally that the country has no coronavirus cases and accused the government of faking numbers. Politicians are campaigning ahead of a presidential rerun on June the 23rd after President Peter Mutharika's re-election last year was nullified by the court. Huge political rallies have defied coronavirus prevention measures like social distancing and wearing of face masks. A recently conducted poll shows that 81% of Malawians are not afraid of coronavirus and more concerned about hunger. Malawi has so far confirmed 455 coronavirus cases, and there have been 4 deaths and 55 recoveries. Ghana's Diagnostics has developed a cheap rapid testing kit for COVID-19, and if it's approved by the FDA next month, it will complement a tracking app developed by the same company, which could help health authorities ease pandemic restrictions.
Ghana's homegrown Diagnostic expects approval for its rapid antibody test kit for the new coronavirus from regulators by the end of July, saying the test could help health authorities plan the easing of pandemic restrictions. Inca's founder and CEO, Lord Anthony Basing, says the test uses finger prick blood to detect 2 types of antibodies produced by the body when it is fighting off COVID-19 infection.
It's able to give you the various components.
He says most of the testing today are molecular tests, which detects the virus itself. The Inca's test is a little different from that because it tests the body's reaction to the virus.
If you're able to do the antibody test and you're able to find out that maybe a majority of people have had the infection and are having antibodies, you can open up those systems. They can go to church and everything, because at the end of the day, they are not going to transmit the virus to any other person.
Ghana has seen one of the highest number of positive COVID-19 cases in West Africa at nearly 10,000. It has begun a phased easing of restrictions put in place in early March to curb the spread of the disease, and plans to reopen schools and universities from June 15. President Nana Akufo-Addo said the country will invest and ramp up local manufacturing of health equipment, including gloves, masks and scrubs, while increasing tracing and testing for the virus. It has so far tested over 233,000 people. Founded in 2002 in Ghana's second largest city, Beijing says polymerase chain reaction are the gold standard in detecting the novel coronavirus, but they're also expensive, and the rapid test kits could help contain the spread of the virus within communities more cost effectively.
Africa is a net consumer of diagnostics and not a net producer. So basically what we do is that we import every single kit that we are going to use here in Africa. And therefore, when you have a company that basically develops and manufactures here in Ghana, there are several things that makes it very important. First of all, it becomes a way to build the capacity of young people in Africa to be able to develop test kits. Secondly, it actually gives you an African perspective. There are a lot of diseases that are African. And so when you are developing a test for a disease that is in Africa, the utility, the engineering and everything has a context that you need to put in place.
Founded in 2002 in Ghana's second largest city, it's already producing pregnancy test kits and has the capacity to produce around 50,000 kits per week. The company is also working alongside developers in Nigeria, Cameroon, South Africa and Senegal, backed by the World Health Organization, and a seed fund of $10,000 on a mobile app that aims to help trace potentially high-risk people. Inca said it can manufacture 50,000 kits a week and hopes the FDA will approve it within the next few weeks. If it does, Beijing says he'll sell it outside of Ghana.
More stories now. The International Criminal Court says it has in its custody Ali Kushaib, the leader of Sudan's Janjaweed militia, which fought a war in the Western Darfur region in the early 2000s. Kushaib reportedly surrendered voluntarily in the Central African Republic. He is wanted on 50 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity, including murder, rape and torture. A warrant for his arrest was issued 13 years ago. Sudan's former president, Omar al-Bashir, is also wanted by the court. At least 300,000 people were killed and 2.5 million others were displaced by the conflict in Darfur. The Norwegian Refugee Council says for the second year running, the conflict in Cameroon with the English-speaking separatists has been rated the most neglected in the world. The African nation's Anglophone minority are fighting for autonomy after what they term as decades of marginalization by the central government and the French-speaking majority. Some of the separatists have declared autonomy over 2 regions, a move rejected by President Paul Biya. Cameroon has also been hit by a refugee crisis from the neighboring Central African Republic and continuous attacks in the north from the Islamic militant group Boko Haram. The annual list of neglected crises is based on 3 criteria, which is lack of funding, lack of media attention, and political and diplomatic neglect. There are 9 African nations in the list of 10, with Venezuela being the only non-African this year. The report also highlighted the ongoing armed conflict in Sahel region that includes Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, which has resulted in the deployment of military forces from a host of European nations. Niger and Burkina Faso appeared on the list for the first time. And joining us now is the team lead at Next Year Nigeria, an international security firm based in the UK, from where he joins us. Good evening and thank you for joining us. Now, do you agree with the Norwegian Refugee Council report that the world ignored the conflict in Cameroon?
Yes, I think the report did actually explain what the situation is. The world seems to have taken a new direction in area of the way most global conflicts are looked at. If you're looking at the conflict in the Sahel and then the issue of terrorism in the Lake Chad region, it seems the world seems to have focused much of its attention in the area of global terrorism than internal conflict like the one we see going on in Cameroon.
But what are the concerns of the English-speaking parts legitimate, or are the concerns actually legitimate, as there are some who do not want to get into a discussion about it?
If you try to look at from 1961, when that part of Cameroon voted to join their brothers, their Francophone brothers, to form a nation, it has been 50 years plus of what I could call a structural violence, which the Cameroonian-led Francophone government seems to have a kind of committed on the Anglophone-speaking part. It has nothing to do with the French communities, but it has a lot to do with the governance system that tend to neglect anything English, anything Anglophone. So you could see that their culture, their local governance, things about them have a kind of been assimilated into the French culture. They are not allowed to be who they are. So for them, it's a kind of violence they wanted out of. Yeah.
Now, one other thing that the report talked about is how the arms conflicts in surrounding countries have actually impacted on this. Interestingly enough, these countries, which include Nigeria, have also been impacted by the conflict. Why do you think that these neighbors are not willing to engage in the crisis?
Well, let's take Nigeria for an instance. We can even take Central African Republic. Nigeria has its own more than its own share of problems. You could see Nigeria is waging a war against Boko Haram and other terrorist groups in the northern part of the country. Nigeria is equally battling with the issue of the insurgency and the banditry going on in the northwest. And again, Nigeria is equally being diplomatically tactful about it, knowing that you have the issue of secession from groups like the IPOB in the southeastern part of Nigeria. If Nigeria decides to support or show any kind of support to the Amazovia people, it might bite them somehow, because IPOB and other groups looking for secession from Nigeria will cash in on it. And secondly, Nigeria is equally being a bit tactful about it, knowing that the issue has a lot to do with issue of self-determination, and self-determination, which she cannot say to be doing very well.
How do you suggest that this crisis is resolved?
First, issue of self-determination is something every ethnic people are entitled to. It's there in the UN resolution. People are entitled to it. So the way you go about this is a different thing. If you look at places like in the UK, where after years of agitation, Scotland have to have a kind of autonomy. Wales have to have a kind of autonomy. So what I think is that it has to do with negotiation, and by now they should be thinking about bringing them back to the table, which is where I think the world is neglecting. The entire world is looking away while the Cameroonian government is committing what I could say is a genocide. More than 700, close to 800 people have been internally displaced. The humanitarian issues going on there is so much that is even affecting Nigeria. A lot of them are flowing into Cross River and so on. So I think the people of Southern Amazonia community, if they need self-determination, it's not too hard to give it to them. They can still be part of Cameroon, but they should have right to determine some of the things that that affects them. I think that's the right way to go.
Dr. Ndun Wokolo, team leader Next Year Nigeria, thanks for speaking with us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Still ahead on Network Africa, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt agree on the role of observers in the Nile dam dispute. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Residents in Burundi's largest city, Bujumbura, said they were in shock on Tuesday following the death of outgoing President Pierre Nkurunziza, who had ruled for 15 years. The 55-year-old Nkurunziza was due to stand down in August when retired General Evariste Ndayishimiye, who successfully stood for the ruling party in last month's elections, was due to take over. Bujumbura residents said the news of the president's death shocked them, as he had not yet handed over power, with one adding that the news was too incomprehensible for him to accept. Nkurunziza, a fitness enthusiast who increasingly relied on religion and repression to rule the impoverished and unstable Central African nation, leaves behind a country dotted with the unmarked graves of his political opponents, an economy in tatters, and a question mark over whether infighting over his succession could divide the country's powerful generals and security chiefs. Burundi is largely cut off by international donors after the United Nations documented the widest rape, torture, and murder of political opponents by ruling party activists and the state security forces. Independent journalists are largely in exile or in jail. Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt are trying to agree on what the role of observers should be as they resume talks to resolve the dispute over the Grand Renaissance Dam. The talks, mediated by the U.S. and World Bank, stalled after three countries could not agree on a timeline for filling the mega dam. Ethiopia has announced its intention to start filling the dam's reservoir in July. When complete, the dam will be Africa's biggest hydroelectric power plant. Its construction began in 2011 on the Blue Nile tributary in the northern Ethiopia highlands. According to a statement from Ethiopia's water ministry, the new round of talks are being attended by representatives from South Africa, the European Union, and the United States as observers. The talks, which began on Tuesday, are being held virtually because of the coronavirus pandemic. Let's talk more about this with the VOA correspondent in Cairo, Edward Yerelian, who joins us now. Good evening, Edward. Thanks for coming on the program. Now, tell us, what do we know about the talks and the hopes of surrounding what it aims to achieve?
Well, you see, so far, the parties have not specified exactly what their demands are. Egypt has been hoping to spread out the filling of the reservoir over a longer period of time. They've never exactly specified how long that period would be. Some say that Ethiopia would like to fill the dam between 3 and 5 years, and some say that Egypt would like to do it between 5 and 10. Now, those are all talking points that you hear from people when you discuss the situation, but I've never actually heard it out loud from an Egyptian official or from the Ethiopians either. The Ethiopian prime minister has said specifically that Ethiopia does not want to harm the interests of any of the neighboring countries. I guess he means Egypt specifically there. But unfortunately, the agreement that was reached in Washington back in February did not suit the Ethiopians. They didn't sign it, and Egypt did sign it. So there is some worry as to exactly who is planning to do what. But as you said, they are planning to start filling the dam this July, and September, during the rainy season, it could stretch out to September. And the one positive factor that we're seeing is that it's been a rather rainy year, at least here in Egypt. So maybe that will allay the worries of some of the people who are negotiating.
Now, who's likely to have a greater control of the dam when it's completed?
I mean, obviously, the dam is on Ethiopian territory, so I suspect if a future Ethiopian government wanted to play hardball with the parties downstream, specifically Sudan and Egypt, they could. But so far, all the parties seem to be expressing goodwill, and the Sudanese who are in the middle of this have gotten both sides, Egypt and Ethiopia, to sit down, even though I think Egypt was reluctant to do so. They've all at least shown some goodwill in trying to negotiate, even if they haven't come to an agreement.
But it's clear that these three countries will benefit from the dam when it's completed. But are there chances that more African countries could jump on it?
Well, everybody, most Middle East countries have been talking about tying their electricity grids for a number of years. And in Africa, we've been hearing that kind of talk as well. Egypt has tied its electricity grid to Sudan recently. And I think the surrounding countries to Ethiopia are hoping to get electricity from the dam as well. And I think Ethiopia, of course, would like to profit from the dam and to sell electricity to its neighbors other than just Sudan and Egypt. So yes, I think it could be a win-win situation, and a lot of countries could profit from this.
Thanks again, Edward.
My pleasure, BC.
Now, Egypt's food and restaurant also took a hit with COVID-19, and some cafes switched from selling cooked food and dining in to selling vegetables and fruits after the government banned public gatherings and closed coffee shops and restaurants amid efforts to stop the spread of the coronavirus.
36-year-old Mohammed Sabri is one of those coffee shop owners who had to make the switch to selling fruit and vegetables in order to survive the economic impact of the coronavirus in Egypt. He says he was driven to selling produce to avoid completely closing down.
What made me think of this idea is that all of us have children and homes to feed. If we don't work, we will not be able to eat in these times. The coronavirus has ruined the country, not just us. All coffee shops have closed, and 90% of us won't open again. I have to think of something to feed myself and my children.
Egypt has been hit hard by the coronavirus, experiencing a surge in daily registered cases over the past 2 weeks, despite government efforts to impose strict measures.
And that's it on today's program. Thank you for watching. I am BC Adebayo.